Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Sports Exchange. My name is Scott Morganmouth, the Motor City Madmouth, and I have a pretty good crew on hand tonight to talk about what we're going to be talking about in the show. Just for you folks to know, under the microscope, Ryan Flores coaching future. And you want to talk about a loaded topic, this is definitely it. Before I go any further with it, though, I'll let you know that this broadcast can be heard on Spreaker, Spotify, Apple, Google, iHeartRadio, wherever you get your podcast. And for that matter, you can see it on the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. And you can also find it on www.southfloridatribune.com. With that said, let me go ahead and talk about the crew. We got Rick Curti. Welcome back, Rick.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on the program.
You're very welcome. Steve Balestrieri. Long time no see.
I know. It seems like we just did this last night.
Yeah, we did. In fact, we had a really nice broadcast inside the pigskin, our opening act, and Eric Katz did a good job. Steve and Mel, obviously, we all had a good foursome there, and we're looking to build on that show. But welcome back again, Steve.
Thanks for having me.
And Greg Fuchs, the master writer here, who does more writing than I do. But then again, I have to run the operation. Welcome back. I know that you're definitely going to be connected heavily with this subject, so we're looking forward to your input. Welcome back, Greg.
Glad to be here. I'm glad you think at least one person thinks I'm a master of something.
Well, that's okay. And of course, my top-notch running back, Mel Farr Jr., who got into a nice little exchange with Eric Katz last night. And I guess Steve Balestrieri and I have agreed that next week when we do this again, him and I are going to have the popcorn out while Mel and Eric go at it. Welcome back, Mel.
Thanks. Great to be back.
All right. Well, we have a lot to get to here, so we'll get right to it. Stephen Ross. Well, I want to start at the top with Stephen Ross. And he was looking to pay Brian Flores, so it says $100,000 to go ahead and lose games. And we all know full well in the NFL circles, that's a no-no, whether you're tanking games to me or throwing games, however you want to stereotype it. So, all right, Greg, we're going to lead off with you. Why don't you give everybody a basic overview, what your story is? We'll talk about that, and we'll address each and every topic that I have written down here. Okay, Greg?
Yeah. Well, the story, as you guys probably realize, is two main topics. One are all the Stephen Ross allegations and the supposed $100,000 incentive to Brian Flores to tank games. And then you have the other part where Brian Flores is claiming systemic racism in the hiring practices for coaches and general managers and senior level positions. So, I mean, I'll start with the Stephen, since I'm a Dolphin fan, I'll start with the Stephen Ross stuff. I mean, the first thing that jumps to your mind is, could this be true or not? And my gut says, yeah, I can't imagine somebody would just make this stuff up. Brian Flores says he has corroborated evidence. I'm not sure if that's a witness or emails. In the meantime, Stephen Ross vehemently denies doing anything like that. So somebody's lying to us.
He said he had texts from the GM that corroborate that.
Okay. So, you know, the NFL is supposed to investigate. Hopefully they do it expeditiously, but you never know with the NFL, because this is just huge implications in terms of the integrity of the game. And then you got Hugh Jackson from the Browns claiming something similar with, you know, Jimmy Haslam, the owner of the Browns, offering incentives to tank. And, you know, if they prove this stuff to be true, I mean, the consequences could be multiple. First of all, I think they forced Stephen Ross to sell the team. All right. And then I can't believe that Stephen Ross and Brian Flores, assuming this stuff is true, are the only two people who are aware of it. I mean, Chris Greer, you think, would know about it, and who knows about other people in the organization. And the NFL, or whoever the new owner of the Dolphins becomes, if he has to sell the team, they just may look for other heads to roll too. Hey, if you guys were all part of this, you said nothing about it, you guys are all gone. I am just cleaning house. And, you know, this, you know, the Dolphins have been enough of a dumpster fire as an organization for the last 20 years. The Bullygate, just multiple GMs and coaches and losing games, not making the playoffs. They still have to hire a head coach. I mean, if you were a head coaching candidate, would you want to step into this situation? I think they're supposed to interview Mike McDaniel, I think, tomorrow. I mean, half of Mike McDaniel's questions have to be about all the stuff that's going on. I wouldn't want to coach that team unless you knew what was going on. And I question how honest they'll even be with him when he asks those questions.
All right, Steve, why don't you take over there?
Well, I mean, you know, I'm a firm believer in B-Flow and Brian Flores. I saw how he coached up here when I was living in New England. I saw how the players interacted with him and how they believed in him. I saw firsthand how the Miami players believed in him. He's a guy with a heck of a lot of integrity, and I don't think he's making this stuff up. I really don't. In regards to the coaching, I think his allegations speak for itself. There's 32 teams in the NFL. There's one coach that's not white, head coach, excuse me.
Right.
So I think that, you're going to have a hard time disproving that. Are you telling me there's only one qualified head coach
Right.
that's African-American? No, that's, and he went even farther today because he said not only did Bill Belichick text him the wrong information about Brian Daboll, he said today, it was one of the TV interviews he did. I'd have to double check, but he said that Belichick actually had a hand in the Giants hiring Daboll, which I don't know if he'd have that much of an influence. I can certainly see Belichick recommending Daboll for the job because, for one, it would be beneficial to Bill Belichick to get Daboll out of the AFC East. So, would Belichick recommend Daboll to the Giants? Absolutely. For one, he has a lot of respect for him when he coached under Belichick. So, and the other would be, getting him out of the AFC East. But that's a pretty damning thing there, too, because he's saying Belichick, recommended and had some influence on Daboll getting the job over him.
Rick, what's your take on this?
Well, it's very disturbing. We've heard other coaches, Flores, not only did he say that they wanted him to tank on purpose, but he said when he went to go interview with the Broncos that John Elway was like hungover and disheveled, and they kind of just blew him off. We've heard Hugh Jackson say the same thing about getting payouts. Actually, Marvin Lewis came out and criticized the Panthers and said when he interviewed for the job, they blew him off too. And so it's very disturbing when you have great African-American coaches out there, like an Eric Bieniemy out there. Jim Caldwell is a great coach. I'm just shocked that he's not an NFL coach. He's a great coach. There's so many out there, and it doesn't look good when there's only one African-American coach in the NFL. And then they fire African-American coaches and hire white coaches. So it just doesn't look good for them. But we'll see what happens with it. Flores' career is probably done. I just see him as another Kaepernick where they're just going to blackball him and probably will never get another head coaching job. And it's a shame because there are problems in the NFL that's been going on for many, many years. The Rooney Rule is supposed to help, and unfortunately it's not. I think in the last 3 or 4 years, it's actually gotten worse when it looked like there was some progress being made. So it's very interesting what happens. I don't think he's making it up. I just don't see him wanting to sabotage his NFL coaching career to say something that he sees that there's a problem. So we'll just see what happens, and we'll see what the NFL does. And we know how the NFL does when they investigate things. There's times that they have lied and hidden evidence, especially about CTE when they want people to know all about that stuff. So it's not good for the NFL.
All right, Mel, we're leaving you for last on this one. You've heard what everybody has to say. I'm sure you've had to by now an opportunity since we talked about the topic last night on Inside the Pigskin, a chance to think about the subject a little bit more. So why don't you give me your overall perspective, Mel Farr Jr., about what's transpired here, not only about Stephen Ross beginning, and then we'll go deeper into the coaching situation in a moment. But we'll start right now, Mel, where we're at with not only the $100,000, but where we're currently at.
Yeah, there's two things that you're talking about here. You're talking about an owner telling him to tank so they can get a better draft status, and then you're talking about the hiring practices in the NFL. I'll address the first one first. The fact that an owner would ask in particular, an African-American head coach to tank is disturbing on a number of levels. Number one, obviously you're messing with the integrity of the game. But the second thing is, the opportunities for African-American coaches are few and far between, and have a guy have on his resume like Hugh Jackson, to have a resume that looked like that doesn't bode well for you getting another opportunity in the NFL to coach again. And it's not like you're going to tell, if he has an opportunity to interview again, that they're going to make mention, or that when they call and get a reference, a personal reference about the guy. Well, we asked him to do this here for. They're not going to do that because that goes against the rules of the game. So that's very disturbing. Now, obviously, when they called, probably because there's a lot of rumors out there that he was very difficult to work with. So now I understand where those rumors came from, because I had heard it. He was, he's very difficult to work with, is the thing that I heard over and over again about Brian Flores. And now I understand where that comes from. Now, the Rooney Rule was put into place because not only were there not many African-American coaches, they weren't getting the opportunity to interview. So the Rooney Rule was put into place, one, to give African-Americans the opportunity to go through the interview process, to see what that interview process is like. And the other thing is to get in front of the people who actually make the decisions, and hopefully compel them and have a change of heart to give them an opportunity. The fact that we have a Rooney Rule, tells you a lot about the state of the game, that we have to have a Rooney Rule. It's kind of like affirmative action. The fact that you have affirmative action, the fact that you have a Rooney Rule, tells you that there is a problem. Now the problem is guys are getting interviews, but they aren't being taken. And we knew in the beginning, when a lot of guys were getting interviews, they're just getting interviews to satisfy the Rooney Rule. Well, there were some cases where guys went in and just blew ownership or upper management away, and they just had to give the guy the job. And that's what they were hoping what would happen, is that guys would just blow ownership away and say, you know what, he's the best qualified candidate. Now, had I not even thought about interviewing him, or had it not been for this rule, I would have probably never thought to interview this guy. So that was the purpose of the Rooney Rule, to give these guys an opportunity. Now he's had the Rooney Rule in place, and it's like most owners or upper management already have an idea in mind of who it is that they want to hire to be their next coach. And so no matter who they speak to, who they bring in, they've already know who they're going to hire. Jerry Jones hired Mike McCarthy. He already knew he was going to hire Mike McCarthy. Everybody that came in was just for him, just to talk to. Any black coach that came in there was just to satisfy the Rooney Rule. So the problem is, and you look at some of the demeanor of the African-American coaches versus the demeanor of some of the white coaches, and it's very different. It's very different. You look at a guy like Tony Dungy, they're not from the, let's say, good old boy network. They're not from, like Jerry Jones and the beer and nachos. They're not going to sit down. Tony Dungy is not going to sit down and have beer and nachos with you. He's not going to do that and just shoot the crap with you and all that kind of stuff. So the problem with ownership is it's the good old boy network. You got the good old boy network, then you got nepotism working in there. They're all related to somebody. This, their dad was this person and that. So there's a lot of things wrong with the NFL right now as far as hiring and giving African Americans legitimate opportunities to fulfill these coaching vacancies. Here we are again. I think there were 8 coaching vacancies.
Well, we started with 9.
It started with 9. I don't think one is going to be filled by an African American, and that is a shame, because there's plenty of qualified candidates out there, and not one of them is going to be filled. They're not going to be given the opportunity. Now, you can't tell me that some of these coaches can't be any better than Adam Gase, the kid up, the kid up there in Chicago. He did, he had one good year maybe, but then the rest of the times. But Adam Gase was probably the worst head coach I've ever seen. Ever seen. And he got an opportunity. Now, will he get another opportunity? I don't know. But he was horrible. You can't tell me there's not somebody out there that's at least better than that deserves an opportunity.
And some of the coaches that were hired really didn't get a fair shake. And I go back to Todd Bowles with the Jets.
Right.
Because he's a really good coach. And when the Jets hired him, they purposely, I mean, they didn't spend any of their money. They had so much cap rollover, and he was the victim of that. Then, you know, they brought in Adam Gase, and they spent all their cap money, and it didn't go anywhere anyway. But you know, I thought Todd Bowles got a really raw deal from the Jets.
Yeah,
And the other thing
Yeah.
is they keep changing, they keep moving the goalposts. I mean, they say, well, we got, in order to have more minority coaches, we need to have more minority coordinators. They need to be more of them in the coordinator position. Well, you got all kind of, you know, you got plenty of you got coaches now that are being hired that weren't even coordinators. I mean, some of these guys are getting jobs. The guy that got the Giants job last time around, he wasn't a coordinator. People are getting head coaching jobs right now. They aren't coordinators on their respective teams. So the goalpost constantly keeps me, well, now, okay, now, you know, we got a lot of defense coordinators. Well, we wanted to be an offensive coordinator, you know. So you got all these African-Americans that are defensive coordinators. There are very few that are offensive coordinators. So it's always a moving goalpost of what it takes to be a head coach.
All right, let me add a few things to this whole thing that I think will really put things in even deeper perspective. Number one, let's go back to the Rooney Rule. First of all, when the Detroit Lions hired Steve Mariucci, okay, they knew that he was going to be their coach, and they had those interviews with African American and in their building. Okay, that was before the Rooney Rule was created, and we know that Matt Millen got fined a couple $100,000 by not giving anybody a fair opportunity. Let's talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers for a moment. Okay, Russ Grimm was in line to get that job. However, Mike Tomlin blew the Rooneys away and got hired instead. I'll take you guys another point where Rod Marinelli was a position coach, not a coordinator. We know how that worked out in Detroit, 0-16. I don't have to sit here and give you a whole lot more background on it, because all I'm doing with each and every one of you is verifying that what you're saying is entirely, without question, correct. Now, with that said, okay, as it stands right now, there were no new coaching hires yet today. 5 jobs have been filled, 4 remaining. And again, no new black coaches. And the only one that we currently have is Mike Tomlin. The 4 vacancies left are Jacksonville, Miami, Houston, and New Orleans. Obviously, those numbers don't lie. But I'm going to bring in some words here that come into play, and like allegations, accusations, sham interviews, because that's where a lot of the words that are being bannered throughout this whole process, whether it's Hugh Jackson, whether it's Terrell Austin, whether it's Marvin Lewis, you know, and the list goes on and on. So we'll go back to what Rick was talking
Where's
about.
Hugh Jackson now? Is he at Grambling?
Yeah, he's at Grambling.
Yeah, he's at Grambling now.
I'm actually glad he got the Grambling job.
That's a perfect fit.
Well, it's a
fit.
good job. It really is. You have some history there with
Eddie
Robinson.
Eddie Robinson.
Eddie Robinson. So I'm actually glad. But the point of the matter is now we have a lawsuit, as Rick alluded to, where does Brian Flores look like the next Colin Kaepernick, and does he get another job? I'm going to ask each and every one of you that question, then we're going to go further into this discussion. Rick, short answer. Does Brian Flores get another job?
No.
Steve?
No, and I'll tell you, on our Patriots podcast that I do, before all this blew up, there was a lot of talk about Josh McDaniels being Belichick's successor. And I said I wanted the Patriots not to hire Josh McDaniels, but Brian Flores when Belichick retires. And now I don't see that happening at all. I don't see them bringing him back in any capacity whatsoever. And that's a damn shame. Sorry, I know you wanted a short answer.
Oh, I don't care. No, you get. That's an honest answer from.
That's the guy I wanted when Belichick retired. I wanted them to bring back Brian Flores.
Well, listen, you're closer to the situation. You're from New England. If anybody's more qualified to make a New England-based opinion, Steve, there's no question that you definitely are.
Well, you know, because I saw how the players reacted to him when he was the defensive coordinator in New England.
No Charlie
Players
Weiss.
all loved him. They absolutely loved him up there.
Yeah.
And you know, they held the Rams to 3 points in the Super Bowl. So there you go.
Greg, what about you? What do you think about this?
I don't think he's going to get a job this hiring cycle. which is probably good for him because why would you want to coach Houston or New Orleans? But I think the risk hiring him right now is what if, even though I think he's telling the truth, what if he isn't? And then you'd be stuck with a head coach you just hired who's stuck in the middle of all those lies. Okay. So I don't think anyone's going to risk it. Next year, assuming he didn't lie and the allegations were true, I think somebody hires him. When there were 9 openings, the popular opinion was he's the best coach available. I wish he was still coaching the Dolphins.
Okay. Mel, what are your thoughts about Brian Flores? Does he get another job?
Maybe coach a Pop Warner team. And the only person I think that would hire Brian Flores would be, and he's no longer living, would be Al Davis.
Yes,
That's interesting.
I agree with that.
Okay, now I'll give you my take. Okay, it's different than every one of you guys. I believe that if he's going to take a job anywhere, I do believe he will get it with the Houston Texans. And I'll say, well, I believe that is the case. And again, time will tell. But because of what you said in previous shows, Steve, Nick Caserio, New England guy.
Yeah, they had a good relationship. Yeah.
Right. So anytime you have a relationship with guys in your previous organization, I think if he wants that job and he's offered to him and he's really sincere about wanting to get back in coaching, my gut feeling is he would go to Houston. And long before this lawsuit took place, remember at the beginning when we did a coaching carousel show, that I had a gut feeling that Brian Flores could be linked to the Houston job. Again, these are opinions, folks. Draw your own conclusions. You have 5 different opinions, and we'll find out how it ultimately plays out. But Steve, my question to you is this, and maybe Greg, you know the answer. Flores signs a 5-year contract, right? 3 years down. Is he getting paid for those other 2 years? That's my question.
Yeah, unless they fired him for cause.
Right. And you're doing anything wrong with
or if he gets hired somewhere else, he gets
or if he signs. Yeah, if he signs somewhere else, then he gets the offset. But otherwise, yeah, he gets paid for that because they did not fire him for cause.
Yeah, because the Falcons are still paying Dan. They're still paying the defensive coordinator for Dallas.
Yeah, Quinn. Right. So then what you're telling me, if I'm hearing you guys correctly, that 3 years down, 2 to go, he's getting paid so he can sit down, relax if that's what he chooses to do. And that's good to know. But again, if the question I ask each and every one of you is all 4 of you guys say you don't think he gets a job. I think if he's going to get one, it's Houston. Time will tell. Okay, so now we're going to throw some keywords out there, and we're going to be able to draw our own opinion on each of everyone. I think we can all agree on, okay, that innocent till proven guilty, right? I mean, that's really the way the system is supposed to work. So the keywords being thrown out there are allegations, accusations, and sham interviews. Let's face the reality. This whole process over the years, because of the numbers, the way they are, there are a lot more sham interviews than we even realized. Terrell Austin came out there and talked about it with the Lions before Matt Patricia got hired. And I know more and more of these things are going to happen. Are we going to have a class action lawsuit where more and more guys are going to join? I guess time will tell. But let's talk about each and every one of those key words, okay? Rick, in a short answer here, allegations, accusations, sham interviews. How do you define each and every one of those words?
Well, I mean, sham interviews, this has been going on for a long time, these sham interviews. It's not the first time that we've heard an African-American coach get to satisfy the Rooney Rule. So that happens. Accusations, it's like you said, so it's, you got to prove it. Just because Brian Flores filed a lawsuit, he has to prove it. So right now they're just accusations. So time will tell what happens. But these sham interviews have been going on for a long time, and it's sad. Like Mel said, there shouldn't be a Rooney Rule at all, but unfortunately there is. So that tells you the problems with the NFL.
So allegations, in my opinion, and accusations go hand in hand, right, Steve Balestrieri?
Yes, I think they go hand in hand. And I would think, and I might be wrong here, but I would think that Flores, if Ross actually approached him to do the things that Flores is accusing him of, I would think that he would have talked to one of his other coordinators about that. And if one of these guys comes forward and says, yeah, head coach was concerned because of this, then that's going to open up a whole nother can of worms, because now, he's going to these other coaches and saying, hey, this is what they want us to do. So I think that is going to be important. He says he has other text messages from Chris Greer that corroborate, that whole Ross wanting him to tank for money type thing. I think if that's the case, then this is going to blow this whole case wide open, because then the NFL, not only do you're going to have to internally investigate this, but then you're going to get the federal government involved in it.
That's true.
As we all know, you never want the federal government involved in anything. So, because then it turns.
So Steve, it's safe to say, and I think all of us can agree, I don't have to ask each and every one of you guys this question. Sham interviews seems to obviously be the telltale story
that's been going on for years.
Agree over the last several years since all this created. So Greg, with you being a local guy here, okay, when you look at this overall situation with allegations, accusations, and sham interviews, and you connected with the Miami Dolphins, what is your interpretation of what we're looking at here?
Well, with the allegations / accusations, someone's going to be proven to be lying. And whoever's lying is going to have to pay a heavy price, I think. Flores may never coach again. Stephen Ross will have to sell the Dolphins. One of those two things will happen. In regards to the sham interviews, the Rooney Rule is good in its intent. It's a noble rule, but you knew there were going to be sham interviews. I mean, I think anytime anybody hires someone, I've hired a bunch of people in my life, you always have your own little short list. People you currently work with, people you used to work with, or people you respect who recommend people to you. That's your short list. And that list could have a lot of minorities, could have a lot of white people on it. And most people are going to stick to that short list. And there could be white guys who don't get interviews because of that short list. And there could be black guys who don't get interviews. And some of the black guys, because of the Rooney Rule, will have to get interviewed. Yeah, the scales aren't balanced fairly for them. I'm not sure what the NFL can do differently, but they have to do something. The fact that 70% of the players are black, and I'm not saying 70% of the coaches should be black, but at least a quarter of them should. So how do they get there? It might just start with getting more black owners, of which there is zero right now. But the Broncos team is up for sale. Dolphins team could be up for sale soon.
It's
And
got
if you
$4
read the
billion.
congressional stuff today on Dan
Right.
Snyder, the Redskins, the Commanders may be
Yeah,
for
Commanders.
sale soon.
All right, well, Mel.
Derek Jeter needs to, start up
A GoFundMe.
GoFundMe with
Hey,
Tom
early
Brady
up-
and buy the Miami Dolphins.
So
There you go.
Mel, you're soaking it all in. Come on, put it all in perspective here, because the one thing there are a couple of things I want to bring up before we go off air. So how do you size it all up? Mel, you have AA beep beep SI allegations. As you can tell, that was the form of commercial. AA beep, is that AA beep beep MCO Amico, whatever.
Amico, yeah. Here's the problem. And people look at some people think the NFL is Roger Goodell. The NFL is not Roger Goodell. The NFL is the 32 owners. So the 32 owners, and 31 of them are white. Then we have Shad Khan. So the 32 owners make the rules. Roger Goodell works for the owners. So Roger Goodell, is very difficult for him to go and tell any of the owners what to do. My dad used to always say, he who holds the gold rules. So the problem is the people that hold the gold, they're the ones that make the rules. Not only do they rule, but they make the rules. And they can break the rules if they choose to break the rules. And obviously they've chosen to break rules. So the other thing is, you say, well, people may join the lawsuit. Well, another thing another old saying is, don't bite the hand that feeds you. How many people want to do that? How many people want to commit career suicide? There's some guys that will just go along to get along. And I think Marvin Lewis was one of those guys that would go along to get along. There's some guys that are just not going to do it. And Brian Flores is proven to be one of those guys that's just not going to do it. And he just happens to be the one that blew the whistle. So now this is really a whistleblower case is what it is. Now, he's not the first one that has happened to. He's not the first one that's felt this way. He's just the first one who had the courage to stand up and say, this is not right, and file and bring it to light. Now, does the NFL really want to peel back this onion and really find out what's going on in their hiring practices? I doubt it. Look what happened to Colin Kaepernick when he did what he did. They made it about everything but what Colin Kaepernick said it was about. Colin Kaepernick never said it was about the flag. He was never trying to disrespect the flag or anyone in the military. It was never, his protest was never about that. His protest was about systematic racism and the way that Black people were treated throughout this country by the police. It took for us to see what happened last year with George Floyd for it finally to sink in, even to Roger Goodell. It finally sunk into him and he finally understood, oh, that's what he's talking about. So Brian Flores is just the one man that's courageous enough to stand up and say, hey, this is not right, and we need to do something about it. He's not in it for monetary gain. He's not in it for fame. He's just trying to do the right thing. It just didn't sit right within himself to continue on just to go along to get along. And I'm sure he's had to do a lot of things just to get along. And he's just fed up. I mean, he just has had enough of it. And he just seems like he's that type of man with that type of conviction where he just couldn't do it anymore. He's a young man. I mean, he's in his greatest earning years right now.
He's 40 years old. Let me add a little bit to the Brian Flores conversation as well. 24 and 25, 3 seasons. Excuse me. Last 2 seasons, he was 10-6, 9-8. The last 2 years, 1-7, he started out. We all know they finished 9-8 with an 8-game winning streak. Talk about a team that rallied behind their coach and didn't quit. My goodness. I mean, to me, that would be enough for me to convince a guy that they didn't quit when they could have given up ship all day early. If that isn't impressive enough, I don't know what is. Now let's talk about the Rooney Rule for the most part in another way. We realize the NFL has tried to incentivize it with the general managers and other thing where they're awarding extra draft choices, what they're trying to do to try to create additional incentive. But that goes back to what you said, Steve, okay? And that's this, okay? Roger Goodell is one person. The owners are 32 separate companies on their own. And, you know, we don't mind giving extra compensatory draft choices. And I think it's helped, and the rules worked a little from a general manager standpoint, because we're starting to see some more minority candidates there, but we're not seeing them roam the sideline. That's the biggest problem that we have here. We'll take it another step further, as I've been watching all day. The NBA is salivating over this. They really are. You have a predominantly African-American league there, and you have a lot more Black coaches there as well. And now the NFL is behind the 8 ball there. So when you put it all in perspective here, one league is thriving off of the other one's difficulties. Wouldn't we all agree that the NBA is looking awfully good right now, Mel?
Yeah, I mean, they're about 80%, the players, 80% African-American, and they got 14 out of the 30 teams that have African-American coaches. So yeah, absolutely. Now, you don't expect 80% of the coaches to be African-American, but you can live with 14 out of 30. I mean, that's good. Right. That's slightly under 50%. I mean, where the NFL is at is just ridiculous. Wow. I mean, it goes back to some of those old thoughts about, African Americans can only do this. They can't play certain positions. There's a time where Blacks couldn't play center. They couldn't play middle linebacker. They couldn't play safety. They couldn't play quarterback, because those are positions that you had to think, and they didn't believe that Black people had the mental capacity to succeed in those at those positions. And then it also goes back to the CTE thing too, where the scores, where we were automatically right from the beginning, we come in with a far lower score because we were African American. So all that stuff plays into what we have going on right now. It's the thought process. They don't really believe that we have the mental capacity to lead a football team. We can go out there, and now you're starting to see more African Americans play quarterback because they want that mobility at that position. Now, but They still don't believe that we have the capacity to be offensive coordinators and definitely not head coaches. But that really goes back to just a good old boy, just having a good feeling with the ownership, going along to get along. And a lot of blacks just aren't that type of guy. They're very serious, singular focused, because they know what this opportunity means, not only for them, but for those who come after them. There's a lot of weight. There's a lot of responsibility on the people, on the African Americans that get head coaching jobs. There was a lot of responsibility on Denny Green when he got his head coaching job, the first head coaching job with Minnesota. I mean, they were a bad football team. He took over a bad franchise and made that franchise respectable. It was a lot of pressure on Art Shell when he got the opportunity with the Oakland Raiders. So when these guys are the first ones to do it, or one of the very few to do it, there's a lot of responsibility. You see what happens to a lot of these guys, they don't even get a year. They
Right.
don't even get a year.
Well,
Let me ask a question for whoever cares to answer it. I'm not sure how many black owners there are in the NBA. I'm guessing not a
There's
whole
only
lot.
one.
the
There's
only
only
one I
one.
know is Michael
So
Jordan.
why is the NBA? Why are all these white owners in the NBA hiring black coaches, but the white owners that don't do it in the NFL?
Do you want the ownership? If you look at the ownership makeup in the NBA is a lot different than the ownership makeup in the NFL. The makeup of the ownership is a lot different, and their mindsets are a lot different as well. The ownership is a lot more liberal versus conservative. There are a lot more liberal owners in the NBA than there are in the NFL. NFL owners are way more conservative.
Yeah, Brian Flores was really trying to avoid being a Hugh Jackson. 1-31 doesn't look very good. And Brian Flores was the rebel with a cause here, not trying to do that. No, but I am glad that at least African Americans are being given the opportunity, at least from a general manager standpoint, right, Rick Curti? Because at least those guys carry a large responsibility as well. And you know what, at least in that sense, it's progress, but definitely far from what we're looking at, So, they have a long way to go.
And look at the leadership in the NBA. You had Stern, now you have Silver. They're minorities themselves, even though they aren't looked at. They don't physically look like minorities. They come from they have a minority mindset because they're Jewish. You look, so Roger Goodell, he reflects exactly what the NFL is, and David Stern and Adam Silver reflect exactly the NBA ownership.
All right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around the horn here, Mr. Opinion, put into perspective here of everything you've had an opportunity to digest and comprehend on this show.
Okay. Well, how I feel right now?
Yeah.
It's a shame what's going on in the NFL. Like the NBA is totally different, with coaches. They don't have a problem hiring minority coaches. And I agree with Mel. These ownerships are more liberal in the NBA than they are in the NFL. In the NFL, I'm sorry to say, they got a bunch of rich old white guys in the South who have that mentality, and it is like the good old boys network. And it's a shame. And you see a lot of people get head coaching jobs because they know this person or know that person. And it's NFL needs to get their act together. You think with the Rooney Rule, it would have been good. It started out good. For the last 3-4 years, it's been going backwards. And to only have Mike Tomlin as the only African-American coach, when you got Marvin Lewis out there and Jim Caldwell, you got Pep Hamilton, you got a lot of great coaches out there that should be given an opportunity. Marvin Lewis, my goodness, he was with the Bengals for so many years. Jim Caldwell, took the Colts to a Super Bowl. Look what he did with the Lions. Why aren't they not getting head coaching jobs? That's a shame. And so the NFL kind of needs to look at how the NBA is doing it right and but it goes for the ownership, because people get all angry about Roger Goodell. Roger Goodell's a puppet. He's hired by the owners. They hired him. They pay him. That's who they want. And they do all the dirty work, and he takes all the brunt. And he gets paid $30 million a year, so he doesn't care. So it's the ownership that's the problem there. And they have a bunch of rich old white guys from the South that have that mentality of they don't think African American coaches are good enough, and they hire their buddies.
Yeah, well, I'll say this very quickly. I want to make sure everybody gets an opportunity here. This has a NASCAR feel to it, and what I mean by NASCAR is the lack of minorities in NASCAR. I remember many years ago when I was working in Arizona, I had an auto racing show. I was ahead of my time at the time, but I believed at that point NASCAR was lacking African American drivers. And I got news for you. The debate I had with my co-host and the station, they were on needles because they thought I was a little ahead of my time with that subject. Nothing came of this situation, but it has a NASCAR feel to it. Steve, go ahead, give me your take on that. And then the last thing
I can't talk on NASCAR because that's something I'm not interested in at all. I don't think I could tell you 5 drivers' names, but
well, you don't mean NASCAR, Steve. I just want to give us your overall perspective of this whole thing.
I think Brian Flores is spot on with this. I feel bad for him because, like I said, I wanted him to be the next head coach up in New England. I mean, I think so highly of him. I think he's done. I really do because, as we said, none of these owners are going to go against their, the other ones. So no one's going to hire him. And the NFL doesn't take kindly to anyone who brings a lawsuit against them.
Right.
And, with him, I think he's done. Hugh Jackson, he'll never get hired again. Hopefully for his sake, he stays where he's at. He has a good gig right now, but it's going to be tough for these next group of guys coming up, because not only now are they going to have to deal with the systemic part of the way things have been done, now the media will turn on the guys that do get hired and say, oh, the only reason he got hired is why? It's because of this Brian Flores situation. So they're not going to get a fair shake.
Right.
The guys who come after Flores.
Well, lawsuit, all we have to do is go back to Al Davis suing the NFL. We all know where that went. So Greg Fuchs, give us.
But Al Davis didn't feel he was one of them. Al Davis was Jewish, so he didn't feel like he was one of those guys.
Right. That's a good point, Mel. That's a good point. All right, Greg, give us your overall perspective. And then I have one last question before we go off, and that'll be who the Miami Dolphins hire next. Greg, go ahead.
Well, I'm hoping there's another Al Davis out there who's going to say, screw you to the rest of the NFL owners and hires Brian Flores, if not this year, then next year. One of the ironic things about this whole thing is Stephen Ross and the Dolphins still have a black general manager, 2 assistant general managers were black, and they had a black head coach. And now they're thrown into the entire mess of this, which is a little ironic. And I think the other thing going on in the NFL these days, I think Brian Daboll is 51. He's like the grandfather of the new coaches who've been hired. Seems like every other coach these days is early 40s, under 40s. So if you're over 50, good luck getting a job.
Mel?
Well, I think the only way that you're going to see change is the players they're going to have to unite. There's strength in numbers. If all the black players decided, you know what, until we see, and we don't want any more decals, we don't want any more slogans, none of this kind of stuff, until we see actual change, not get lip service, we're just not going to play. They don't even have to get the coaches involved in it. If the 70% of players would just say, hey, you know what, we're not. Now, they didn't get behind Colin Kaepernick. For whatever reason, they didn't feel compelled to stand behind Colin Kaepernick and support him and what it was that he was talking about. But this is bigger than them. I mean, this is huge because, a lot of these guys playing, they may want to, go into the coaching profession and have an opportunity to coach a football team or, be a coordinator, be a position coach and become a coordinator, then eventually become a head coach. They might want that opportunity. So this is something that could benefit them if they all could get together and just say, you know what, we're not going to play until we find a solution to this particular problem. We want something with some real teeth in it. We don't want any more slogans. We don't want nothing else painted on the end zone. We don't want any stickers on our helmets. We don't want no more decals. We want to see some real teeth in the Rooney Rule, where we actually see my dad started, it kind of reminds me, back in the day, he started the Black Ford Lincoln Mercury Minority Dealers Association. And there were 7 of them at that particular time. There were Ford dealers in the entire country. And they put mandates as far as the number of African-American dealers that Ford had to put in business. And not only did they have to put in business, they had to give them money to do it. And they had to train them. And then you had to be a partner with them in the store. So there are mechanisms in which the owners can come up with ways to have more African-American coaches. They could put a mandate in there where there has to be at least 6 out of all. So if we're down to 4, the next 2 coaching hires have to be African-Americans, have to be, period. They could do that. Will they do it? I doubt it.
Right. Okay. So basically a quota. All right. So let me go over an interesting point. That's why we want people to go out there and listen and watch the show, because we're making sure everybody has a lot of different opinions, and we're certainly not short on them now. So we're going to go to an easier question. Okay. Everybody gets a crack at this one. The best candidate for the Miami Dolphins job, Rick Curti. You don't need you trying to circumvent too. You're good at trying to get more than you're supposed to, Rick. Give me one candidate who should coach the Miami Dolphins.
I think the one they're going to hire, can't think of his name, the one that was a coach of the Eagles, won the Super Bowl.
Okay. Doug Peterson.
Doug Peterson, yeah. I think he'll be the next coach.
Steve.
Boy, that's a good question. I thought it was going to be Harbaugh, so I'm way off there. They shouldn't have fired the guy they had, but yeah, who wants that job right now?
That's the real question.
All right,
because
if I'm
he's
a
telling the truth,
coordinator right now, and my name's being bandied about all over the place, honestly, as attractive as it would be to be in South Florida with no state tax and the weather and all that, I stay away from Miami. I think it's going to have to be a dark horse candidate, somebody who's not even on the radar right now.
All right, but come on, give me a name. You think I was going to make this easy on you? You know better than that.
Well, Adam Gase has already coached there, right?
Yeah, right. I'll just for the sake of brevity, I'll go with Peterson as well. But
Okay.
honestly, I don't know of any coach that would want to go there right now.
All right, so we got 2 Petersons. All right, we got to go to Greg Fuchs, who probably knows a bit more about that, most of this than any of them.
I'm not sure if I do, but I'll give you my opinion anyway. I don't think they've interviewed Doug Peterson, and they have no intentions to, but who is the next coach and who they offer it to and accepts it? Different questions. They're interviewing Mike McDaniels tomorrow. I don't know anything about him other than what I've read. Supposedly incredibly brilliant offensive mind, even though he hasn't called the plays in San Francisco. Supposedly gets along with players very well. They're interviewing him tomorrow. He may tell the Dolphins to go stuff it, but I think they're going to offer the position to him. And if he says no, they may have to loop back to a Doug Peterson, maybe even a Darren Rizzi, who supposedly is interviewing.
I know that they were supposed to do interviews with McDaniel and Kellen Moore from the Cowboys, but I don't see either one of those guys taking a bite on that job.
They may not.
All right, so Greg, give me one. Okay, don't pull a Rick Curti here. Don't give me $9 million.
I gave you an answer.
If I have to cast the vote, I'm going with McDaniels.
All right, Mel, and then I'll give you mine, and then we'll be able to do the proper IDs. And we're going to give everybody a preliminary Super Bowl pick before we wrap it up. Go ahead, Mel, give me a name.
I don't have a clue, to be honest with you. I mean, my head is spinning from everything that just came down the past couple of days. I don't know who would want the job.
You've established that already, but go ahead.
But let's just say I would think it's going to be an offensive coach, because somebody who believes in Tua, because obviously I'm guessing that ownership believes in Tua, and that was one of the problems that Flores had there was, he wasn't really sold on Tua. So, I don't know. I'll go with the McDaniels guy, because I don't even know who he is, but I'll go with it. I don't think Kellen Moore leaves Dallas. No. I don't think that'd be a good first job for him. I don't think it's a good first job for anybody. I think it's probably a good second job for somebody. So let's go with Doug Peterson, because I don't think anybody in their right mind for their first job, I don't think this is the job you want to take on.
Okay, well, you know what? Everybody gets a preliminary Super Bowl pick, but I'm going to give you my pick. Ready? I'm going to really make this show really interesting. I would think if the Dolphins had any sense at all, they'd bring back a former assistant coach by the name of Jim Caldwell. That's who I think they should bring.
Who? Dolphins?
Yeah, I would bring back Jim Caldwell. You need a guy to settle the ship down. He certainly has a great track record, develops
I hope he doesn't take it. I really
All right,
do.
but I'm giving a name, Jim Caldwell. We'll have a lot of Dolphin fans paying attention to this broadcast, and I think Jim Caldwell. That said, okay, Rick Curti, let everybody know how they can get a hold of you. Before you do that, give us a basic Super Bowl pick right now.
I have the Rams winning this one, 38-24.
Steve,
I like the Rams in this one. I think it's going to be a little closer. I think Joe Burrow and that Cincinnati defense are going to make it a football game. I think it'll be 30-27.
Greg Fuchs,
I'm going with the Rams. I think they got a better defense. I'll say 27-24.
Mel Farr Jr.
The tough one. Yeah, I told you last time, don't sleep on Burrow, but I'm going to go with the Rams. I'm going to go with the Rams, and I would say 28-21.
And I'm going to go with the Rams too, 27-20. And I'm going to give a little bit of a prompt for those of you that didn't listen to the Rodney Dangerfield / Rocky Balboa show that we did. Listen to it, because that's my I told you so moment when I felt that the Rams would win and the Cincinnati Bengals. So a little bit of a prompt to myself for my I told you so. Rocky Balboa.
Go ahead and pat yourself on the back.
Yeah, I will. I'm going to do that tonight. Rocky Balboa, okay, versus
Celebrate
Rodney
with an orange
Dangerfield.
soda, Scott.
What's
Yeah.
that?
Celebrate with an orange soda.
There you go. Absolutely. I don't drink alcohol, so I have to do it with an orange soda. So with that said, okay, before we wrap it up, I know Mel's got family bits to take care of, but Rick Curti, let everybody know how they can get a hold of you.
You can contact me on my website at charlottebats.com. And my email address is cltbatsbaseball@gmail.com. I'm also on Facebook at Charlotte MLB, Charlotte Bats Baseball. I'm also on Twitter at Charlotte Bats Baseball, and I'm also on LinkedIn under Rick Curti, CURTI, and Instagram at Charlotte Bats.
Steve, you're next.
Yeah, I'm on Facebook, Steve Balestrieri, and Twitter at Steve B7SFG.
Greg,
You can find my articles on southfloridatribune.com. Twitter, it's G Fuchs at Gregory Fuchs. And you also can find me on LinkedIn.
Mel Farr Jr.
On all the social media sites at Mel Farr Jr., Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and you can find out what we have going on here locally in Atlanta and also in Michigan at melfar.org.
All right, I want to recap where you can hear the show: Spreaker, Spotify, Apple, Google, iHeartRadio, wherever you get your podcasts. Also subscribe to our YouTube channel, South Florida Tribune, on youtube.com. Hit South Florida Tribune. You can find it on the website, www.southfloridatribune.com. I do want to point out, too, that you can find me on Twitter at Tribune South. So once again, please listen to all of our shows. We have a lot of great shows out there. All you need to go to the website, locate them. Our latest launch was 100. We have 108 Stitches Baseball Talk on there, that Rick Curti's a part of. And then we have Inside the Pigskin, Sports Exchange No Limits, South Florida Tribune Podcast. Guys, I know it was a tough subject to work on. Somebody had to do it. I think you guys did a really admirable job. I hope for the sake of sanity and reality that we have at least one or two African-American coaches. I thought 3 was too low. Let's just hope for at least 1 or 2. We still have 4 openings. Let cooler heads and common sense prevail. So on behalf of Rick Curti, Steve Balestrieri, Greg Fuchs, Mel Farr Jr., my name is Scott Morganroth, Motor City Madmouth. Thank you for joining us on this edition of the Sports Exchange, and we will catch you the next time. Folks, be careful. COVID-19's out there. Please play it safe. Good night, everybody. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye now.
Good night,
Good
everybody.
night. Good night, everyone.